Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for staying with us. We have a few questions coming through, and we'll move directly to our first question, which is for Simon. Simon, other than Harland Wolff, what supply chain capabilities could SME businesses access for the proposed wind farm, and how can companies register for the Shearwater energy supply chain database?
Thanks very much, Sam. Yes, I'm still here. Really, we are waiting for a decision from the Scottish Government, because I should stress, and I think I pointed it out in the presentation, the wind farm is located in Scottish waters. So we are waiting for a decision there. Once that decision comes, it will be full steam ahead. Obviously, if it's a favorable decision, some of the supply chain will have to look closely at how we can involve Scottish companies as well as Irish companies in that supply chain. If it's an unfavorable decision and we're unsuccessful, we do have Plan A, because this is actually Plan B. Plan A means moving the wind farm over into Irish waters, and we've had extensive discussions on this option with the Irish authorities, and then we can focus the benefits of the wind farm exclusively more so on Irish companies. So from the outset, we have to launch a buoy. I mentioned that. We have to collect data. Liam has gone into that in great detail. There's tremendous capacity for that. We need environmental and community consultation processes. They're best as local as possible. And as I've said, the Irish mainland is the closest mainland to the wind farm. So all of those activities have to be gone through. But then when we get into the construction phase, there's a couple of things I didn't mention in the presentation, although I hinted at them. And following on from my presentation was Mark's on floating wind. And it really has to be said that we're very excited about prospects for floating wind. And the reason for that is this wind farm we're proposing north of Malin Head will be the first 60-year wind farm in the world. Most wind farms don't have a lifespan of 60 years. This one does. There's a complex reason for that, but it does mean that the wind farm will have to go through a very thorough refit between years 35 and 45. And that refit is much easier if it's a floating wind farm. And you can just tow these units into Belfast Loch and refit them there and then and tow them back out again. So 60-year wind farm with a tremendous scope of opportunities for Irish industry to engage in both the original construction, firstly the planning, then the original construction of the wind farm, its maintenance, and then its refit to ensure that it lasts for 60 years. So quite a lot of opportunity there.
That's great. Thanks very much, Simon. Just one other query for yourself. I think it's addressed because it was as regards to the end of the 60 years, the disposal of nuclear waste will affect Northern Ireland, and it won't, because the nuclear facility is actually based in Wales, if I'm correct.
That is correct, yes. The nuclear facilities are at Wilfer in North Wales, yes.
That's great, thank you. Another question here comes through from Mark. Is Mark online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good to see you. The query is, why did you support offshore wind for green hydrogen production rather than generating electricity just for direct to the grid? And therefore, do you see green hydrogen as a commercially viable option for the future of the energy supply?
Well, perhaps it's easier to answer that second part of that question first. And green hydrogen is an energy carrier. And basically, we create the electrons. And if one is to look at the extraction of electricity from the wind as the primal energy source, it then has many, many different uses. So the obvious use is to put it into the grid, and that's what the big rounds for leasing the seabed are for. So round 4 was completed in England recently, and ScotWind is ongoing in Scotland. And so this is looking to put gigawatts of power into the grid. In order for those projects to happen, the grid reinforcements also need to happen. However, electricity is not everything for achieving net zero. There are two aspects to this. The first is you electrify everything you can, but what you can't electrify, you have to decarbonize through other ways. And a good example is the steel industry, but there are many others where they cannot use electricity for a carbon neutral energy source. And that's where things like hydrogen come in. So the market for green hydrogen will emerge over the coming 6 months very, very clearly, with government policy being announced very soon. When we talk about the scheme I described, its primary purpose is to decarbonize the oil and gas facilities by electrifying them and therefore allowing them to remove the polluting gas generators that they have on these facilities. We cannot conflict with other applications that are happening right now for seabed in the Scottish arena, mainly ScotWind, and therefore we are not looking for a grid connection. And hydrogen plays an important part for the scheme as a whole. Firstly, it provides us with a fuel source for creating electricity when the wind doesn't blow enough, and then we feed the electricity from our own hydrogen back out to the platforms. But secondly, we don't want to waste a gust of wind. We believe that efficiency in wind farms is an absolute key criteria for going forward, and therefore the hydrogen, as we're not looking for grid access, is a perfect energy carrier for us to take our spare electrons and transform them into hydrogen and help kickstart the hydrogen economy in the UK.
Okay.
And
What
my personal view
for that project to start?
Yes, well, the project is, if it runs to our schedule and what we want to deliver, then we would hope to energize and have our first electrons flowing and our first hydrogen produced at the end of 2024. So this is a fast track project by all accounts, given the scale of it. But we are also pursuing several what we call initiator projects, which sit below the national level and are able for local communities and regions to access, where they might be 100 to 300 megawatts. And we are investigating 1 or 2 of these off the coast of Northern Ireland at the moment as well. And these are to produce perhaps green hydrogen, maybe to feed data centers or other industrial requirements for green power.
Okay, thanks very much, and hopefully the projects will come through. Keep your fingers crossed. Alan, a few questions here for you. Due to the significant expansion of the UK offshore wind sector, how best can businesses prepare now for engagement with the sector? And will BEIS bring forward legislation to ensure the banking and the finance sectors provide the gap in funding to support the building of the UK supply chains and help achieve the desired target of 60% content? You back on, Alan? If we lost you again.
Hopefully it should be there, Alan. You're just on mute. Maybe park that, Sam, and move on to the next one. We'll see if we can get back to Alan.
Okay. Go to Davy Hill now. There's a question for Davy. You back up this, Davy? Yep. What type of companies do CSource wish to collaborate with for the provision of additional services to the offshore wind sector?
Some of the companies we would like to partner with or work with is we're already doing it with some, but we would like to, and especially in the Irish sector and the Scottish sector, is vessel owners and crews in those areas. We've been very successful wherever we work in the European waters. In fact, at the minute, French, or indeed in Americas last year, we deployed vessels out there. We used local people and local crews very, very successfully. So that's the sort of people we want to work for. good people who can do onboard liaison communications, drone people who can launch drones from vessels, bird and mammal observers. We provide all that, but it's very important to use the local content for that, Sam. That's where we see that.
Okay. And does Seasource offer a formal stakeholder engagement service for marine developments, or do you bring in specialist service providers for that?
A wee bit of both. It depends on the service. We are known in the communities, and we can liaise between projects and the community. We do provide that service too, Sam. And then where we're not local to that, we can also provide local people to do that very well.
Okay, thanks, Dewey. Good.
Okay,
Alan's back online here now with a few questions for you. I'm not sure you picked them up or not.
Can you hear me okay?
Okay, first was due to significant expansion of the UK offshore wind sector, how best can businesses prepare now for engagement with the sector? And will BEIS bring forward legislation to ensure that the finance sector provide the gap in funding to support the building of the UK supply chain to help achieve the desired target of 60% content?
Hi, thanks, Sam. Sorry, I've had nothing but technical problems this afternoon, it seems. So I think splitting the first question into two different parts. I mean, I suppose a lot depends on where you are in the process. Are you an established supplier? Are you a new supplier to the sector? So obviously, if you're a new supplier to the sector, one of the first things, and it's I suppose you could call it classic business development activity, is you really have to have a good understanding of the marketplace, and more importantly, where you fit in from a supply chain perspective. Because I think one of the often problems is people just go straight to the developer, or maybe straight to the OEM, when in reality it's about understanding where you are in the supply chain and using that classic activity of getting in ahead of time, because a lot of these suppliers will have lengthy processes to become new suppliers. So you've got to get your timing right, so understanding when projects are coming forward to make sure you position yourself in time, because sometimes becoming a new supplier can take months, if not longer, depending on where you are in the supply chain. So I suppose that's classic sort of business development activity in terms of the building relationship, understanding what the technical requirements are going to be for your particular product in the marketplace, all the commercials, all that kind of classic stuff you would do as a new entrant to the marketplace. Where you're existing, if you're an existing supplier, obviously that gives you some already and into the sector. But from our perspective as government, what we're actually doing a lot of is we've just announced a new supply chain plan policy, which I won't go into on the basis of this seminar because it'll probably take too long. But one of the processes within that is we're going to undertake a very much more detailed analysis of what developers are doing as they build out their projects and what they're using in the supply chain, much more deeper than we've ever done before. And that means going right into the supply chain to look at areas of supply chain within the tier 2s and the tier 3s and the tier 4s. So I think one thing I would probably want to say is that if you are an existing supplier in the sector, whether you have already supplied or looking to supply, it's something that us in BEIS and our colleagues, I don't think there's anybody on this call from the Department for International Trade, we kind of want to understand what companies are operating where, what experience they've got, so that we can actually be starting to ask the right questions as we lean on developers, particularly once they get their CFDs. So if you think about the next allocation round in December, we're looking to go through probably a 2-month period of ongoing monitoring of what they're doing, how they're procuring, and how they're procuring throughout the supply chain. So, we're actually trying to build up with DIT a much better understanding of where the UK is strong, what companies are doing what where, so that we can actually ask the right questions when we're talking to developers and, more importantly, their supply chain.
Okay.
So one thing, I know you'll probably share my details. I'm happy to also share details of my DIT colleagues so we can get some of that data in. And I did see some of the slides towards the end of companies that are operating in the IRIS space. That's what we need to know. I think the other thing more longer term that we're looking at, Sam, is how do you actually get some of these opportunities, and more importantly, the right contacts in the supply chain out to the supply chain? Because I think that is a bit of a problem. Now we are doing some work about developing, and it's very early stage, so I don't want to make any promises, but we're working with the Oil and Gas Authority to look at whether we can get a free to access site that actually brings forward all the opportunities and the contacts within the supply chain, including the procurement contacts. because I think that will be a very good front end system to make the supply chain aware of what the opportunities are as they arise, but more importantly, who are the right contacts within the different tiers of the supply chain to talk to. It already operates in oil and gas sector, and it operates very well in the oil and gas sector. So we've been having some initial discussions about, can you expand that into offshore wind, hydrogen, CCUS, that kind of, a platform that covers the entire green space, not just oil and gas. So that's what's in that. On the second question, that's a slightly more difficult one. I very much doubt we'll be legislating for anything. I can't talk to the government. I think one thing that we have been doing discussions with is we have had some initial discussions on the new National Infrastructure Bank that is being set up, and there is going to be a green space for that in terms of, and one of the things we've been promoting to the Treasury in terms of some of the areas it could look at, and I know that this is one of the key areas, is about investment in the supply chain, and whether the National Infrastructure Bank can look at that as one of the priority areas for investment. So that's something we're pushing quite hard with Treasury at the moment as that bank is established.
Okay. Going back a few years back, most of the offshore wind, because it was mainly European companies that took the lead on it, you had to be Achilles registered. As you move towards oil and gas, it's mostly FPAL registration. What do you see this merging?
I'm very much against FPAL Achilles. And now my basis for that is it's a paid for service. And I think it's hard enough without putting more costs onto people and onto businesses, particularly smaller companies, to be registered to do something. And I think the oil and gas sector would probably admit that the establishment of FPAL and Achilles was probably not their best thing they ever did. So that's why the Oil and Gas Authority have now got this new Pathfinder site, and they're trying to get people to I'm not saying move away from FPAL and Achilles, because that's not my job here to tell Achilles or FPAL not to do what they do. In offshore wind, we're trying hard not to go down that kind of a route. We're trying to get something that provides the right opportunities and the right contacts, but that is free to access and free to use. Because sometimes these things can actually have unintended consequences by trying to drive people down one particular area. So that's something that I'm thinking about at the moment. But that's the way I tend to go with it, and not some kind of paid for service. I just don't think that helps.
Okay. And then for companies to engage, over the years, we've always worked with likes of NOF Energy or Renewable UK exhibitions. Is that still the best way to engage with a lot of the supply chain?
Absolutely. Through people like NOF, I know there are others. You've got the cluster groups that have developed through the sector deal that we've got. I think there's 7 clusters. I'm pretty sure one of them does encapsulate the Northwest in Ireland, I think it is, or Northern Ireland, should I say, is one of the clusters. And we are trying to link that together as well to use the cluster network that is starting to exist and link it to people like NOF, who, for example, are already part of the Northeast cluster in terms of what we do. And the Energy Coast, as you're probably well aware of what's going on there. So we want to use that network as well, because that's a way of getting a good access to good quality understanding of what is actually coming through for the supply chain.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. One other question here from Michael is coming through. On the skilled side, certainly from an investment perspective, we've seen a lot of our engineering companies seeing skill shortages because our materials handling sector, or renewable sector, or waste recycling sectors, and also now right buses now starting to ramp up again for electric buses, hydrogen buses. Harland Wolff are starting to get up and going again, and now hopefully the aerospace is going to come back. So skills is a very, very important area. So over to Michael, as regards to, we need apprentices, because there's so many, about 30% of our engineering staff are going to retire in the next 10 years. So we need apprentices. So what apprenticeship courses are available in the engineering sector, which can diversify into the marine and offshore?
Thanks, Sam. So as I mentioned during that presentation, we do have, at the minute, we have level 2 and level 3 apprenticeships in engineering. And within both of those, there are a number of separate pathways that the apprentice can specialize in. So I say in level 3 engineering, there's 10 pathways that they can go along, and that's anything. Well, obviously aeronautical isn't one, or automotive would be particularly of interest, but there is electrical and electronic engineering. There's engineering maintenance, technical support. There's fabrication and welding. There's installation and commissioning. There's mechanical manufacturing engineering. So there's quite a number of those that I would imagine are relevant to this sector. And on the higher level apprenticeship side, there are a number of HLAs in the engineering and manufacturing side, which are delivered by many of the colleges here. So, you know, they're in mechanical and manufacturing engineering. They're in mechatronic engineering. There's a whole range of those too. And within, and there are those are the established apprenticeships there. If we go back to the level 2, level 3, we have what we call sectoral partnerships, which are right across a wide range of sectors across all industries. And we have one with advanced manufacturing and engineering sectoral partnership. So it comprises, you know, quite a lot of employers across a broad range of the engineering and advanced manufacturing sectors. It has the colleges and the universities involved as well, the department, and also SEA, who are the curriculum examination people. And they look at those frameworks just, and we'll look to refresh and update those to make sure that they're still industry relevant. And they'll also look at emerging technologies and where some new frameworks may be needed, and what is coming out certainly particularly is the need for more in the green sector. So that is one I would imagine that they will be focusing on. On the HLA side, well, there are already quite a number of those established HLAs. There's nothing preventing a company or a group of companies, organizations coming together and working with the colleges or the universities to develop a bespoke HLA for that industry. And that's something the department would support.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. Maybe there's no more questions coming through, but I'll put the last one over to Alan here. Okay, well, on the skills side, is there national skills development coming through to the offshore? There was some talk of this through, I think Renewable UK were heading part of this up with the offshore wind sector day. You're still on mute.
Is that better?
That's you now.
Yeah. Sorry, there me trying to be professional by going on mute while someone else was speaking. Yeah, so there is what's called an investment and talent group set up through the sector deal. It's led by a skills professional and the sector. I don't know if you've seen the produce some analysis a couple of months ago on job numbers in the sector, but more importantly, different skill levels within the sector. If you haven't seen it, you can go to the OWIC, that's the Offshore Wind Industry Council website. There's a document and it's called the 2021 to 2026 skills analysis. Gives a lot of detail about the type of skills that are in the sector right now, broken down by skills level, and also by things like technical management and so on. But it gives a forecast to 2026 about where they think the range of skills are going to be required, and identifying where the potential gaps are going to be. It's a good piece of work. It's something that the skills team will do on a more regular basis, because as they get more and more data from the sector, so this is something they want to get really good hard data of the people operating in the sector and trying to forecast where the skills gaps are going to be. They're also doing a lot of work, you're right, with Renewable UK, and it's some things that we're thinking about, and that's feeding into stuff that we're doing through the Green Skills Task Force. That's a government level task force looking across the green agenda, trying to get some identification of where the skills gaps are going to be and how that should affect future government policy in this area. So there is a lot of work going on nationally, and there's also a lot of work going on regionally in terms of trying to identify those skill gaps, and more importantly, build regional connections, you know, particularly around where some of the wind farms are being built, to try and build greater links between the school and academia and business. Because obviously there's a lot of, and again, I caught a bit of the skills piece. A lot of that is really important to be done at a local level as well, linking those things together. So yes, there's a number of activities going on at national and regional level in this space.
Okay, and just one other one from a Northern Ireland point of view. We have a good skill base here on composites. We manufacture composite wings for the aircraft. Do you see blades moving to composite materials in the future rather than fiberglass because of the size?
I think this is something that we are definitely looking at the moment, but because we now have 3 blade manufacturers in the UK, with GE Renewables setting up their facility on Teesside. So the big 3 are now based here in the UK. So yes, it is something that we are going to be working with the DIT, so the Department for International Trade. Apologies for the acronym. And we are doing a piece of work through linking with the National Composite Centre. So the answer, Sam, is yes, it's something that we are kicking off ourselves now that we've landed GE Renewables to look at that kind of supply chain base to supply 3 major blade manufacturers in the UK, and what more we could be doing in this space. It's literally just come onto our sort of radar in terms of a piece of work that we're going to be doing. So I probably will be in touch at some point to try and work out what because that's a bit I was talking about in terms of a better understanding of what the supply chain is under key areas, because we tend to focus on the big components. Yeah. So the blades or the announcement we made the other week there about foundations. What we need to then do is look at the supply chain aspects and what the UK can and could be supplying to these kind of big facilities. So it is going to be a bigger area of what we do in the future.
Yep. Just to bear in mind, as we worked with you 10 years ago on this, Belfast still a deep water port. We still have over 50, 60 acres of development land available for future development for deep water access. We still have a good engineering supply chain, so we'll be in contact with you and keep.
Absolutely, and I didn't. Thank goodness I missed my own presentation. But I think from a floating wind perspective, that is, there's a huge opportunity, and that's obviously when you look at the west coast in Northern Ireland, floating offshore wind is going to provide, because the bases for them are not going to be Teesside and Humberside most likely. No. You're not going to be seeing floating wind being serviced from that part of the UK. It's going to have to be, and also from Northwest Scotland. It's unlikely you'll see, I don't want to talk for a floating wind developer, but it's unlikely you'll see northeast of Scotland being a base to supply the west coast and the Celtic Sea and the Irish Sea. So there's definitely, that's the big opportunity on the west coast and for Northern Ireland.
Okay. That's great. I think today's webinar has been very successful. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Hope you found it useful, and especially I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all our speakers for giving up their time and giving excellent presentations.